There's a lot of stress about exploration and hitting milestones, right? Those are two sources of
Yes.
enormous stress.
Yes. And
Yes.
I guess we haven't said it, but we very much de-emphasize the timing of the milestones and focus on the process.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to reframe milestones as landmarks rather than milestones because, like our babies are not on some like TikTok, linear sort of thing where we have to have guardrails and keep them, on track, or else they're just going to go off and I don't know what. And also some of the focus on milestones is based on old science, old outdated science about how babies actually learn and the relationships between brain and movement development. So I think there's still a lot of the residue of if they don't crawl, blah, 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 if they don't do this, then they're not going to read well. Mm-hmm. And it's just not that simple.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spoil Your Baby podcast. I am delighted today to have Amy Matthews and Sarah Barnaby from Babies Project. I'll be getting to know them and their work today along with you. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we love to highlight wonderful professionals who are working in the world of babies and mothers and fathers and parents. And let's start off with getting to know you a little bit. Let us know, how did you enter the sphere and the world of babies?
Well, I think about Amy and I are infant developmental movement educators. So I think about there's the baby part, there's the movement part, and or the developmental movement part, and then there's the educated part.
Yeah.
I'll also say right at the beginning that neither of us has babies of our own. So we found our way to working with babies, not through having babies, but maybe a more circuitous path, although having a baby can also be circuitous, I guess. So I grew up moving, sporty family, lots of brothers and sisters, athletics, gymnastics, then got into dance, yoga, and kind of finding my way to navigating performance and competition and things like that. And kind of on some level realizing I was looking for something more satisfying or something different. And found my way to studying a somatic movement approach called body-mind centering. And body-mind centering includes experiential anatomy study, but also a lot of heavy focus on developmental movement. Mm-hmm. And I really took to the developmental movement side and then ended up taking the training that specializes in teaching people to work with babies. And once I actually started doing the work with Amy, partnering with Amy, it gradually became what I realized was the most satisfying part of my work.
And that's wonderful. It sounds like we have that in common, sort of kind of seeing some of the issues and challenges that people have in adulthood, but then wanting to trace it back to the origins, right? Sort of taking a preventative kind of look at development. So that's very cool to hear.
And I took a similar path in that I don't have any children of my own, but I was a theater maker and a dance maker. And I was interested gradually in kind of what's under that, how to teach movement, how to engage with things, not in a stylistic way, not how to teach a certain style or work in a certain style, but what are the underpinnings of that? And went from dance and theater to yoga. And at that time, I moved to New York to study something called Love on Movement analysis, which has as a part of it the Bartenia fundamentals. And those are intended to be kind of the building blocks of movement. But they're based on the idea of these are the movements we go through when we're learning to move or relearning to move. So Armgard Bartenia worked with people post-injury to relearn to do things. So for me, I think, and for Sarah too, I think it was less about what are the problems people have and how do we fix them, but more just curiosity about what are the foundations of movement and the building blocks of movement. And I was a yoga teacher and anatomy teacher, and kept kind of getting curious about where, like, under the form, under the, like, this is supposed to look like this, like, what's happening inside an adult's body, what's happening inside a, an activity of daily life, what's happening inside, like, sleeping or climbing or doing asana or learning to crawl. And that also led me through into body mind centering, looking at developmental movement, and then specifically into working with babies. So
Incredible.
actual working with babies ended up being, because I'd studied all this stuff and someone said, "Oh, you have to work with my baby niece." And I was like, "Oh, babies. All right, I guess I could." And then I think I fell in love with actually what it takes to work with infants, which is a whole different kind of presence than adults. So now working with them both is really great.
That's incredible. It sounds like, yeah, both of you had very different journeys and the babies kind of found you. It drew you in a way, which is so beautiful. It's so wonderful to see like these different backgrounds coming to come to enrich babies so beautifully. Fantastic. So tell us more about your methods and babies project. So curious to hear more about it.
So I'll talk maybe about IDME, Sarah, and then also you can talk about babies projects. So Sarah and I are both trained as IDMEs, which it stands for Infant Developmental Movement Educators, as Sarah said. And there's IDMEs all around the world. There's not lots of us, but there's hundreds of us, maybe. And we're trained through the School for Body Mind Centering in applying this developmental work to working with caregivers and with babies themselves. So part of it is about facilitating the experience of the baby, but a lot of it is about educating caregivers. And we say caregivers to include parents, adopted parents, anybody who's in the field of a baby, anybody who's touching and handling a baby, anybody who's influencing a baby's environment.
Yeah.
Because we think that all the choices we're making as caregivers has an impact on how a baby learns to move. And learning to move is also learning to learn. So the psychosocial, emotional ramifications of how we learn to move, or our first touch and movement experiences, they ripple out into the rest of our life. So we can get really granular about what we recommend in terms of positioning the baby, in terms of how we hold them, because we think all of our choices matter. We also balance that with, if a baby is loved, we, babies of all ages, are amazingly resilient creatures, and we figure it out. So we're also interested in looking at what's going right, looking at all the ways that things find a way. And while we have this kind of theory, we have a model where we study developmental patterns, we study reflexes, we study sensory integration, perceptual processing, we study the whole ontogenetic progression from embryology all the way through walking in life until death. While we study all that, what we do is we try to look at the patterns and the relationships that cultivate developing the ability to engage with the world. So while we might look at a specific reflex or a specific skill for a moment, we keep trying to weave that back into the whole picture, which includes all the relationships around a baby. So doing the right thing by a baby in a way that completely stresses out the caregivers like isn't worth it to us. We're looking at the whole system, the whole ecosystem.
I feel like the statement learning to move is learning to learn is a huge statement, a big place of learning. And it makes sense to me. It makes sense that that's engaging with the world, curiosity. Is it respected? Is there intrusiveness there? All of those kinds of things. Do you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, maybe I'll talk a little bit about what does developmental movement mean?
Yeah.
Because of course a baby's developing and there's movement involved. In a way, I guess it's an approach that acknowledges that it's kind of a ground up process. We often talk about horizontal being a baby's home base when they're just new. Like that's the place they can be without having other support in a sense.
Mhm.
And also from the ground up, there's a way that can evoke also gravity and space. So we're looking at what is the process and how can we support it as caregivers and through how we shape the environment for a baby to find their way through their own engagement. Hopefully curiosity, but someone recently criticized too much focus on curiosity because sometimes it's survival. But some engagement is leading the learning,
Mhm.
and that the learning feeds back on itself. And that's part of the learning to learn. And that part of what we think learning to move is not something we need to teach, but we as caregivers play such a big role in shaping the environment.
And our responses to how the baby's moving and exploring in the world, right?
Yeah. I'll say one other thing, and I'm sure Amy wants to chime in. One of the things we prioritize in talking to caregivers about movement development is the importance of falling skills. And I sometimes frame it as falling skills are not like a separate category of movement. They should be a very rich part of a movement vocabulary. And it's not just about avoiding falling, but having lots of strategies and also having the assessment skills built through trial and error at low, small falls and then bigger ones so that they're building their own resilience, resources, capacity to meet the world and keep themselves relatively safe in it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I developed, and I still have it. My son's almost 8. Every time he falls, I get adrenaline shoots down my legs, like this like lightning bolt shoots down my legs. And I did take the approach of be curious, when he would fall down, I'd be like, how was that for you? Right. And sometimes it was he needed support and sometimes he was just, ready to keep going. But yeah, you mentioned that. And I'm like, oh my God, he fell the other day and I still have those lightning bolts shooting down my leg. So we kind of have to balance that, being there, but also supporting, the curiosity and things, which is hard for people. And I think the other thing I want to hear more from you, but the other thing that's coming up for me in this conversation is I do see a tendency of guarding a lot of exploration and a lot of movement in modern parenting. So there is, like you bring up falling, there is like a tendency of like not letting like catching them every single time and not having, those natural consequences of moving around and exploring in the world. Also, a lot of like restricted places where babies are, right? In like the containers, right? Some babies I see are like moved from like a car seat and then they're clicked into a stroller and then they go home and then they're put into a swing and another thing, right? So I'm curious about everything you have to say. I know it's a lot, but I want to make sure we get your opinion on it. Yeah.
I'm going to pick up on the thing Sarah said about babies don't need to be taught to move.
Yes.
And with that idea, they'll figure it out, assuming there's no restriction in the nervous system or physical impairment
Yeah. Or
or
fear, I guess.
challenge. They'll figure it out. So the idea that we need to practice sitting with the baby, that we need to practice standing, that we need to practice walking, we don't ascribe to. We think that they will figure out how to do level changes. They'll figure out how to do the transitions. But it's not to say that we don't matter at all.
Mhm.
Because the choices we make about the positions we put them in have a big effect on what they're capable of doing in any of those positions.
Mhm.
So one of the things, we have a little handout that little cartoon figures on it that kind of summarizes the things we want to say, which you can get on our website.
Beautiful.
And one of the things we say is don't put babies into vertical positions they can't get themselves into and out of. So we
Mhm.
don't recommend putting a baby into sitting until they can get themselves into sitting or
Yeah.
into standing, because falling from there, if they don't know how to get there, they probably don't know how to fall out of it.
Yeah.
And if they do, they might not have the reflex to support themselves. So they might fall, but like hit their head instead of do head writing or something like that. So while they don't need us to teach them, we don't have a completely like do nothing and they'll be fine. We are also making choices for them all the time. So how can we make choices that meet them at their capacity? And that's kind of where we feel like our expertise comes in. Like we know the theory. We know the theory about what a baby at this level of development has available: its visual capacity, physical, motor skills.
Yeah.
The reality of each baby completely varies. I mean, between us, we've seen 1,800 babies. None of them do the textbook progression, but they all figure out something about how to be in the world.
Yeah.
So there's something about, like, it's not only saying that restriction is bad, but like, how is it balanced with, like, containment can be really useful.
Yep.
And it can also be problematic. And too much participation can interfere with them making choices, but a completely hands-off approach can also not give them the support they need. So in this approach, we do a lot of like, well, this and this and this and this. And the choices we make a difference. And babies figure it out in all the situations they're in. So we think that containers, to go to your specific question, like containers are really important for keeping babies safe. And time out of a container, time on their sides, time on their bellies, time on their backs, uncontained, is also really important for learning how to do things.
Yeah. I think the part about sort of the nuanced part of support, but not overdo it, that's probably going to be a place of for a lot of interest, right, for parents. So as a starting point for a mom who's listening with a baby, what's sort of the best, at home kind of way to get started? Maybe with a baby who's still pre-crawling, maybe comfortable on tummy time, something like that.
One of the things we love to share is the idea of getting comfortable on all four sides: tummy, back, right side, left side.
Yeah.
Side gets left out, it seems a lot in our world. And that's one of the reasons we don't love like sitting and standing, in part, especially if we're doing it without enough support for the baby, because they're not oriented to where they are. But it's also that we as adults spend so much of our time vertically oriented, and the babies will get there. But in the meantime, getting really like bonded, we talk about bonding to earth and gravity. And when I see a 2-month-old, I recently saw a 2-month-old who was early tummy time. We talk a lot about how we help them get in there so that their experience of it, it's not like whether they hate it or love it, because babies aren't making that kind of cognitive, like they don't boycott tummy time because they know what tummy time is. They're telling us something about their experience.
For sure.
And so how can we kind of troubleshoot and help them have a better experience? And when I see a really young baby fall asleep on their belly after hanging out there, or just hanging out there chewing on their hand, I think it's a beautiful foundation of comfort on the earth. And they can focus on lifting their head later, but it's really a foundation of comfort and bonding that supports the curiosity and supports the exploration that will help them get to the next place.
I think another really foundational thing, I mean, we start with newborns. Like, if we could, we would be there. We actually have a workshop we've created called Preparing for Caring, which is for planning and preparing parents so that they can learn these ideas before they have the baby. And we've done some like workshops with doulas so that they can help know this information with brand new babies. But it's to support them from underneath and to hold them in a way where they're not hanging from any body part. So not letting the head fall back, lots of people know, but the under the arms hold where the fingers are trying to protect their head, like what we want is them to be ideally horizontal, supported under their head and butt. So that's support from underneath, so nothing is hanging, and so they can bring their hands and their feet together. And all of that sets them up for orienting to midline. If we can have a little flexion in their spine, it sets them up for orienting to themselves in a way. And that becomes that holding position which one of our teachers called baby balls. So we call baby ball, holding them in baby ball, sets them up to have a baseline to come back to. So when the world pulls them out, they can come back to baby ball. And if we hold them in a way that's inadvertently kind of stimulating, then it can be harder for them to settle. So we're saying from the very beginning, can we support them settling, getting settled, getting comfortable, getting oriented, getting bonded? The world will bring them out.
Yeah.
So we're not into stimulating babies. We're not into getting them to do things. We're into how do we support them, assuming that the world is plenty enough to bring them out, and that there's no such thing as a lazy baby. There's no such thing as a spoiled baby, to the point where when someone comes in and says, my baby's lazy, they don't want to do this, or my baby's spoiled, so they're not working hard. We're like, that's not the model we take. They might be afraid. They might be disoriented. They might not know what to do next, but they're not lazy, and you can't spoil a baby.
Yeah.
You can try to, but which would be great. But
well, it's a really beautiful area of like just this like nuanced way of thinking about holding them, of thinking about handling them and giving them the opportunities for their motor development and sensory development. Because I just think about so many of us, I had a lot of experience with babies, but so many of the mothers in my world and sphere and professionals, their baby often is the first baby they ever hold, because we're just so disconnected from extended family and communities, and the mothers and the maidens, we're all separate, and that's a whole other thing. But so for people are curious about this, it sounds like just a very beautiful and rich area to explore, right? Because it sounds like you're also teaching us that this is the foundation for other things to come, like other types of learning, other types of growing. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
I'm going to go back maybe to the topic of falling. I feel like some of what we do is, well, one thing we do is observe and share our observations, because we think that if caregivers can appreciate how much is going on, that there'll maybe be less stress about their progression, because we sometimes hear nothing's happening, they're plateaued, they're whatever.
There's a lot of stress about exploration and hitting milestones, right? Those are two sources of enormous stress.
Yes. And I guess we haven't said it, but we very much de-emphasize the timing of the milestones and focus on the process.
Yeah.
And Amy and I also love, part of what we like about working together is being able to learn from each other and kind of riff off each other and trying to articulate the ideas and share like how things landed with different people. And we've been exploring trying to reframe milestones as landmarks rather than milestones, because, like our babies are not on some like TikTok, linear sort of thing where we have to have guardrails and keep them, on track, or else they're just going to go off and I don't know what.
There's so
but the metaphors, just pointing out the problem with the metaphors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and also some of the focus on milestones is based on old outdated science about how babies actually learn and the relationships between brain and movement development. So I think there's still a lot of the residue of, if they don't crawl, blah, 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 if they don't do this, then they're not going to read well.
Mm-mm.
And it's just not that simple. We have evolved this far, and anyway, back to coaching. So with falling, what we sometimes will do is be with a caregiver and their baby as they're learning, like to stand up and get down, which always involves falling at the beginning.
Yeah.
And like, kind of like, can we be ready to rescue them without appearing to hover? And can we, through that process, build our trust in them? Or can the caregiver build their trust in their baby's ability to manage this thing and say, oh, they've got that. I can back off, or I can relax, or I can. And I feel like that plays out and we recently heard from a mom whose child is now 12 or 14, who we saw as a baby, and what comes out of her mouth about what she sees in him and his ability to navigate the world, and how that was set in, like, there's this just very, to me, when I think about, I don't know the neuroscience of it, but there's something about the relationship that she has so much trust in his ability to navigate his life. And that to me is one of the most rewarding things to see play out later on.
Or biggest wishes, right? That's for the early parenting for that to come out that way. Yeah.
I think we also, like, we've developed this work into working with toddlers, and one, to the question about how it progresses, like, some of what we talk about is, if in the beginning we're a place, like a home, a base for them to know what it is to feel comfort, to feel oriented, to feel supported. And from there, they can, from being held in arms, they can look out at the world, and then they can go out and come back. And then maybe that can grow into being with them when they have something that's dysregulating. And that can, someone just asked me, like, how long do you do this baby ball thing for? Like, do they get to an age when they don't need to be held in baby ball? And I was like, forever. It just might turn into, we have toddlers who, like, run back to their mom for just a second at baby ball, and then they go off again. And then when maybe it turns into a verbal kind of baby ball, or an atmospheric kind of baby ball, or, like, do we not at all ages want to be able to be a resource for young people to come to and be oriented and then go back out into the world? So we talk about babies of all ages, and Sarah also works with elders. We all went through this with varying degrees of support and facilitation or not. And so, yeah, it serves us all, I think.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's such an important part of growing the baby's nervous system. And I think I often I'm always hesitant to put too many things on the radar of new parents, because there's the list could just go on forever. But this does seem like a very, very important place for people's attention to be, right? Because it is, it's going to be part of your parenting no matter what, right? This is there. And so it really does make so much sense to be informed and aware of how this is unfolding. So for people who are listening and curious, what are ways that parents and possibly professionals could learn more and receive some of this information from you?
Our website is babiesproject.org. We have a tab called Infant Handling that has a lot of materials for the preparing for carrying.
Beautiful.
It plays out in workshops. We have some videos where we explain it. We also have a playlist, a YouTube playlist that shows some of the handling techniques for picking up, putting down, holding little babies, explaining to some degree the philosophy. Yeah, and we have a blog. We do some writing. We try to explain why we make the suggestions we do, backing it up with philosophy, so that caregivers can vet us for themselves based on whether they agree with the philosophy, and then whether they want to go further and try out the suggestions.
Lovely. Lovely. And so you have classes and trainings for people?
Yes, thanks. I'm based in New York City, and I teach a weekly class in the Chelsea neighborhood at a place that offers babies and toddlers called Kids at Work.
Great.
I'm also in Brooklyn a couple of times a month at House of Wonder, which is a play space and cafe for families.
Wonderful.
And I also do home visits, both kind of self-organized small groups and also privates.
And I'm based in Portland, Oregon now, and I do a weekly class at a space called Ready, Set, Grow, and another weekly by donation session at another space in North Portland. And Sarah and I both also do on Mondays, we do an online session that caregivers can bring their babies to. During the pandemic, we started doing it, and not so, people come and go, not so busy right now, but we do work online. We do preparing for caring sessions online. So people will be like, "Great, niece is having a baby. Can we do this online?" So, and I do home sessions and group visits. And so there's a ton of information on our website about that.
Wonderful.
I'll also say that I also, with Sarah, that I direct a program in training people to do this work. So if you're interested in studying to be an infant developmental movement educator, you can find information about that training on the bodymindcentering.com website, which is about all the body mind centering training, or the program I specifically direct is called Sonder Movement Project. So Sonder Moves, SONDERMOVES.com, talks about how you can study the IDNI work if you're interested in doing that.
We'll put all the links in our show notes as well. I mean, thank you both so much for being here today and sharing this beautiful knowledge with all of us. So really
You're
appreciate
so
it.
welcome. Thank you so much for giving
Thank
us
you
a
so
chance
much.
to talk about it.
Pleasure.